All right, well, hello everyone, and thank you for being here today. I'm Aaron Moss, and today I'm going to tell you how to make research methods your students' favorite class. Now, to start off, I want to ask you to do something that's a little bit unusual for an online webinar. I want you to close your eyes and imagine you're teaching a class. And as you're teaching, everything is going really great. You introduce concepts and you talk about their implications. Students are asking good questions. They're contributing to a lively discussion. Each example and illustration that you introduce lands well. And you feel energized by the exchange of ideas in the classroom, and you actually feel confident that your students are learning the material. What you're doing in front of these students doesn't feel like work. Your job is simply to facilitate their learning, and it's actually pretty enjoyable. Now open your eyes. That's the kind of class that we all want to teach. And if you've experienced something like this even once, you know that this sort of teaching isn't magic, although it can sometimes feel that way. The question is, how do we create these conditions within the classroom? I think the answer is that we make sure students genuinely care about the material that they're learning, and we help them see how the things that they learn in the classroom are going to benefit them well beyond the classroom. Now, if we take a moment to be honest with each other, let me ask you, how often does the experience I just described occur within your research methods classes? For most teachers, I think the answer is not as often as we would like. And there are many reasons why that might be the case. First, not every student wants to be a researcher. In fact, most of them don't. They're taking research methods because it's required. And so right from the beginning, we start with a gap in enthusiasm and engagement. A second problem is that the concepts we talk about in research methods are often abstract. We talk about things like internal validity and reliability and random assignment. And while all these ideas are important, they feel disconnected from the things that that initially got students interested in a topic like psychology or another social behavioral science. The third problem is that there are few opportunities for students to practice what they learn. Research methods is a skill, and like any other skill, it's something that's best developed through repeated exposure. You might engage in the activity, get some feedback, and then turn around and do it again. Most courses don't have room for that kind of repeated exposure. Maybe there's a lab component, maybe students put together a proposal by the end of the semester, or they collect some data, but it's really hard to create the repeated kinds of experiences that students would need to really practice research methods. So I'm sure we can all agree there are some challenges to teaching research methods. For a long time, this has just been the reality. But I think the status quo has changed. And what the textbook I'm going to introduce you to is designed to do is to provide students with a more engaging experience in research methods. So today I want to show you how we built a research methods course that creates the kinds of conditions that would lead to engaged student learning. Not by accident and not just for a few of the best students in the course, but on purpose for each student every week of the class. So this book that we have written is called Research in the Cloud, An Introduction to Modern Methods in Behavioral Science. And I co-wrote this book with Jonathan Robinson and Leigh Blitman. Two things that we want you to know upfront about this book are that it's being published by Cambridge University Press, and it is a completely free open access textbook. That means it's free for you as a teacher, and it's free for students. So I'm going to pause for just a second here. And drop a link in the chat. So the link that I just pasted in the chat will take you to the CloudResearch webpage, where we have a full preview of the textbook available. This isn't the official production version from Cambridge, but it is a full version of the book, along with some teaching resources that I'll talk about in a minute. Now, the plan for this webinar is that I'm going to speak for the next 20 minutes or so, telling you what's in this book, how to teach with it, and describing some of the resources that we've created. Then we have about 20 minutes or so set aside for a question and answer session. And during that time, I'd be happy to answer questions you have about how to adopt this textbook, how students have responded in courses that have used this book so far, or anything else you want to know about the technology and sort of the hands-on learning model that we advocate for. So with that, let's go ahead and dig in. So we really had three goals when writing this book. And if you look at the preface or the introduction in the link that I just gave you, you'll see we describe each of these goals in detail. But just to go over them quickly here, our first goal was to write a comprehensive textbook that introduces students to everything they need to know in an introductory research methods course. The second goal was to take that material and make students' learning both active and project-oriented. And then the third goal, which was a little bit unique, was to give students and other readers a guide for how to use some of the most modern and common online tools in social and behavioral science. So for the moment, let's just focus on this first goal, a comprehensive textbook for introducing students to research methods. So here's a look at the table of contents from this book. And the book is broken into two parts. Part one has everything a student learning about research methods for the first time would need to know. Part two is then a guide to conducting online research. So if we just look at the chapters in part one for a minute, you can see that part one begins by introducing students to the scientific study of people and their behavior. Then chapter two introduces some of the modern and online tools that are common in the social and behavioral sciences. Now that chapter is very intentionally placed because after students learn about these tools, they're going to turn around and use them in each subsequent chapter as they learn about things like descriptive research, measurement, correlational designs, a chapter on causal inference, and experimental studies. Finally, part one ends with a pretty unique chapter that introduces students to how to use AI tools to conduct both qualitative and mixed methods research. Now, in writing these chapters and creating this introductory text, we really spent a lot of time and effort trying to make sure the writing was very clear, that it was engaging to students, and that each of these chapters were structured to build knowledge gradually over time. We carefully picked our examples, we developed lots of engaging activities, and we did our best to really make this content something that would engage students and that they would want to read. Our goal was really to take our enthusiasm for the topic and try to spark students' curiosity by sharing that enthusiasm. So as a result of all this hard work, we were extremely gratified when someone teaching with an earlier version of this book shared some student feedback with us. So this was actually the first bit of feedback that we got after sharing this book with some instructors who were teaching with it. And I think it will always be my favorite comment. So a student wrote to the instructor and said, I really liked using this book. It sounded like someone was talking to me and teaching me instead of some other textbooks that can be difficult to read. Right, so I can't think of a higher compliment than a student saying the book sounded like someone was talking to them and interested in teaching them. That's exactly the kind of approach that we were aiming for. And so again, it was just a great piece of feedback from the student to understand that they had picked up on this approach. Now, beyond the content of the book, we've created a number of resources to help teachers who want to adopt this text. You can download each of these resources in a zip file from the website that I shared a little bit earlier in the chat. So the first thing that we've created is an example syllabus. We've taught several versions of this course ourselves, and several other people have taught with it as well. And so we have an example syllabus that you can use to think about the course structure, and you can use to start building your own course. We also have class outlines, where we've thought very intentionally about what material we want to cover in each class and how to structure the different classes over the course of the semester. We've created example PowerPoint slides that go along with each chapter. These slides are just a starting point, but they cover a number of the different activities that we've come up with throughout each chapter, and they really help get you started and thinking about how you want to present this content. We have an example test bank that includes not just multiple choice questions, but short answer and essay questions that we've developed. And we will soon have a complete instructor guide that we will upload as a part of those resources I mentioned earlier. Now, this instructor guide is really kind of a complete manual thinking about the different kinds of technology that you would need to engage in some of the activities we'll talk about in just a minute. It's a guide for thinking about how to structure the course, pacing, all kinds of different things that we've come up with from our own experiences teaching this class. All the materials that you see here were developed with feedback from people who were teaching with a preliminary version of this book. So they've been workshopped, they've been road tested. We're confident that they'll work for you in your classes. Right, so this is really our first goal, just to remind you, was to create a complete text for introductory research methods and to create some of these teaching resources that would make the book easier to adopt. Our second goal, after creating this content, was to really transform research methods into a class that's based on active and project-oriented learning. So just to remind you, a couple of reasons of why this has been difficult in the past is that research methods introduces students to many abstract concepts, and it provides relatively few opportunities for repeated practice. The solution that we realized and thinking about how to transform this content into something students can actively engage with, not just once, but repeatedly throughout the semester, really focused on realizing that what used to take an entire semester in terms of planning the study, creating measures, gathering data, and then analyzing it can now actually all be done in a single class session. There are a lot of research tools that have been created over the last 10 to 15 years. And because these tools are so easy to use and so accessible, we believe the best way to teach students research methods is to have them actively involved doing research throughout the entire semester. And in fact, I'd say our goal in creating this book is to transform research methods from a course where you tell students about research to one where they actually do research as they're learning about the concepts. And this form of active learning begins on the very first day of the class. So rather than try to describe this approach to you, I think it's best to let me walk through one of these examples the way a student would experience it. So in chapter 3, we introduce students to the Heinz dilemma. This is a moral dilemma that we return to throughout the book as we illustrate other research designs. But here, the goal is just to describe what people think. And perhaps you're familiar with this dilemma or you remember parts of it. Comes from the work of Lawrence Kohlberg, who was interested in developmental psychology and moral psychology. This is an updated and abbreviated version. So students learn that there's a woman who is sick and dying. There's a drug that doctors think can save her, but it's very expensive to acquire. So this woman's husband, Heinz, can't afford the drug. He tries to negotiate with the company. He tries to raise money. And regardless of where he turns, he's unable to come up with enough money. So faced with this predicament, Heinz decides to break into a pharmacy and to steal the drug. Now we find that right away, students are engaged with this dilemma. They're often very willing to share what they think is right and wrong, and they're often very surprised to learn that other people think about this dilemma differently than they do. So after engaging them in this conversation, students are asked to predict how they think 100 US adults would respond. And in other words, they're asked to create a hypothesis. So after students have engaged with and thought about this dilemma, they come up with a hypothesis. And then the book walks them through how to program this survey in a survey platform just as if they were going to collect the data themselves. And for many experienced researchers, programming a survey is not all that exciting, but for students, it's new, and therefore it's a valuable learning opportunity. Just earlier this semester, someone who's teaching with a version of this book shared some student feedback with us about their experience programming the Heinz dilemma within Qualtrics. You can see here the student said, "Dear professor, I'm currently in the middle of using Qualtrics to make this survey. Everything's been going well so far, and it's honestly pretty cool to be on this side of things." And what the student means this side of things is the researcher side of things. In chapter 2, we asked students to sign up as a participant on our Connect platform and to complete several studies, just as a way of learning about what kinds of studies are being conducted online and to get a sense of the participant experience. Then the book asks them to step into the shoes of a researcher and to begin going through a project like this. So even something as simple as programming a survey is a valuable opportunity for students to understand how research actually gets conducted today. We have some resources and videos that I'll get into in just a minute that really help students through each step of this process. All right, so students are introduced to the Heinz dilemma. They are then asked to program the survey in Qualtrics as if they're going to collect the data. And then the last part of this example is that students, rather than collecting the data themselves, the book gives them a data set with 100 participants matched to the US Census, and then it asks them to conduct some descriptive analyses. You can see just by describing how 100 adults respond to this moral dilemma, there's a lot that you can teach students. So there's all kinds of things here to describe about statistics and distributions, describing people's responses. And all of this is more meaningful because students are actively engaged with the example. But here's where things actually get really fun in this course and in this example. After students walk through this guided project, the book asks them to come up with their own idea, some twist or variation on the Heinz dilemma. And in fact, students are told that they're in a competition with all the other students in the class. After everyone thinks of their own descriptive research question, they quickly present it in a minute or so to the class. The class then votes on what they think the best idea is, and the class then turns around and gathers data from 100 people on Connect. This takes about 5 or 10 minutes, and then everyone can turn around and analyze the results together again. This delivers that sort of repeated practice and exposure that I talked about earlier. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that students have been interested in so far, they've asked questions like, what if Heinz was stealing the drug to save his pet dog instead of his wife? What if Heinz was stealing the drug to save his 11-year-old son? Or what if Heinz's wife was pregnant? Do each of these questions shift people's moral decisions and their judgments? So even though each of these questions are being studied in the context of descriptive research, you can easily see how this foreshadows experimental research. We found that a lot of students later in the semester, when they talk about experiments, come back to this dilemma, and they end up conducting some sort of experimental design where they manipulate a variable, randomly assign participants to these different conditions, and then look at what impact that has on people's judgments. Right, and over throughout the book, throughout the course, the book uses these guided projects as a springboard for some of students' own ideas, which we've found are often fun, insightful, and interesting. And just to clarify or to provide some structure to what the book does in each chapter, it really structures or scaffolds students' learning through 4 steps. First, each chapter introduces a concept. It might be something like measurement, correlational designs, or descriptive research in the example we just saw. Then students are given a number of real-world applications of that idea, or they walk through a number of examples. Then the third step is that they go through a guided project. That's similar to what we just looked at. There are all kinds of materials to help students go through that initial example. And then after going through the motions and learning about that research design, students are then asked to modify it in some way to conduct their own independent research. And these last 2 steps, walking through a guided project and then conducting their own, provide that sort of repeated exposure, that repeated practice that we think is important for supporting students' learning. All right, so in addition to this structure that's woven through each chapter, we have a number of different resources to support this kind of active-oriented learning. So there are about 10 different projects that we've gathered data for throughout the book, and they have responses from over about 2,500 participants in total. These example projects cover a number of different topics. So there are studies that look at the big 5 personality measures. We have a study that looks at a number of different clinical outcomes, things like anxiety and depression and sleep disturbances and trauma. There's a study that draws on moral foundations theory to try to understand why people make different judgments in the Heinz dilemma. There's even a longitudinal data set that has measures of anxiety and depression from the same group of 500 participants stretching over a 1-year period. In addition to all these different projects and data sets, we have survey materials and data sets ready to analyze. So throughout the book, students can program surveys in either Qualtrics or a survey platform that we make available here at CloudResearch called Engage. So if you don't have access to Qualtrics, students can use Engage for free with this textbook. But there are QSF files that students can basically upload into either Qualtrics or Engage to get them started creating each survey. There are Word documents that they can look at to build these surveys from scratch. And there are data sets that they can download directly into SPSS if that's what you teach with, or an open CSV file that they can use with other stats packages. We primarily teach with SPSS throughout the textbook, but there are also guides that you can use to show students how to conduct analyses in both JASP and Jamovi. And then finally, all the different materials and resources for each of these projects is available on the Open Science Framework. So students can navigate to the project page. They can find the different data sets, materials, and other resources that are part of each project. And these are all open access that they can download. In addition to those materials, we've created a video series that guides students through different important parts of each one of these projects. And we found that this video series is really important for answering a number of logistical questions or things that students might be confused by. So in teaching this course, we found our own students would ask questions like, where do I find the data file that I just downloaded from the Open Science Framework? Or how do I upload a QSF file into Qualtrics? The video allows us to show them exactly how to do those kinds of common tasks. And just to give you an idea of what these videos look and sound like, I'm going to play just a couple of seconds here of one of these videos.
Welcome back to the Research in the Cloud video series. In this video, we'll learn how to run a correlation analysis to examine the relationship between anxiety and depression scores. We'll also create a scatter plot to visualize this relationship.
All right, so just a quick preview, but these are broken into chapters. Students can skip around. And when we conduct different kinds of analyses,
first, make sure you have your data.
You can see here, we actually guide them step by step through SPSS or whatever program it is that they're working in.
Set open.
Right, and then the last thing that's important in terms of how we've structured this to be active and project-oriented is that there's a portfolio structure built into the book that makes evaluating students and assessing what they learn over time much easier. So scattered throughout the book and in different activities, there are these different icons that show students they need to add things to their portfolio. And so throughout the entire course, students are building this cumulative portfolio of their work. They add things like hypotheses, study output, figures that they've created, reports of different statistical results or their own interpretations. And in this way, they create a simple way to assess progress and the things that they learned throughout the semester, while also creating this tangible record of the skills and knowledge that they have accumulated by the end of the course. Right, so just a reminder, the first goal is to provide a comprehensive textbook for teaching research methods. The second goal is to make that content both active and project-oriented. And then the third unique goal of this book is to give people a guide for how to successfully conduct online studies. So this is a completely unique sort of section for a textbook, and a lot of it draws on our experiences and expertise in conducting online studies. So just to return to the table of contents and focus here now on part 2. A lot of the content in this part of the book is slightly more advanced. It might be ideal for an independent research course, for students conducting a capstone or a thesis or dissertation project, or even for people in a postdoctoral or faculty position who are transitioning their work to online research. But our entire goal with this section of the book is to provide people with this easily accessible guide that teaches people how to be successful conducting online research. So that begins with understanding some of the different places to recruit participants online. We cover different ecosystems that are available, including more than 500 different online platforms. We talk about their strengths and weaknesses and how all kinds of different things like sampling and the design of the study fit into the right choice for where to find participants. Then there are 3 chapters dedicated to data quality. These chapters not only explain some of the problems with online data quality, but they offer all kinds of different solutions. Then you can see there are chapters on best practices for designing surveys to ensure a good participant experience, best practices for setting up and launching online studies. And then there's a chapter on research ethics and the participant experience. While most research methods textbooks have chapters dedicated to research ethics, this chapter is focused on navigating IRBs with all kinds of examples and guidance for how to submit an IRB application. And then finally, the last chapter of the book focuses on writing a research report. So in teaching with this book, you might focus in an introductory course on the first 8 chapters, the fundamentals of research, and select certain chapters from part 2 to supplement that. Maybe something about submitting IRB proposals and writing research results. In the chapters of part 2, we tell a number of different stories, especially like in this chapter 10 about data quality. We tell a number of stories about research, real studies that were unsuccessful or went wrong in online research because of problems with data quality. And then we get into a detailed description of how these problems with data quality in online research affect different kinds of studies, walking through how they affect descriptive studies, how they affect studies where the goal is correlational, and how they affect experimental studies. All right, so just to summarize a little bit about the book here. I mentioned that our first goal is to offer a textbook that introduces students to everything they need to know in an introductory research methods course, and to do that with a text that's open access. Then, in order to make learning about research methods both active and project-oriented, we have all kinds of activities and assignments that help students practice the things that they're learning over the course of the semester. All of these activities have been workshopped in prior courses, and so we are confident that they will work for you and your students. And then the last part, part 2 of this book, offers a guide to conducting online research that even experienced researchers can learn new things, but especially for students who are conducting online studies for the first time, this is a guide for how to be successful. So if this material sounds exciting, we want to help you adopt this book in your classroom, and we hope that you find that Research Methods doesn't just become your student's favorite class, but your favorite class to teach as well. So with that, we can transition to a question and answer session. You can put questions either in the question and answer tab, or if you feel comfortable, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. We can speak back and forth. Just before we jump into that, I want to quickly share an update about the status of this book. So I mentioned earlier that we have a preview available on the CloudResearch website. That's the nice high quality version that you can use. Right now, we are working through the production process with Cambridge. Just earlier today, before this webinar, I was working on page proofs. That's what I'll be returning to when we finish up here today. And we expect the official version of this book to be available later this summer from Cambridge University Press. Until then, our online version is the complete book, and students or teachers can always access that version on our website. So one person, Sarah Beth, asks, is the book free only to those in academia, or is it free to researchers outside of academia as well? This is an open access book, so it's free to everyone who wants to use it. The version that's on our website will stay there. We might add extra content over time, but once the book is out from Cambridge University Press and it's on their website, it'll be freely available to anyone who wants to read it and use it. So I see another question here from Adam. It says, you mentioned that students could use Engage for free if they do not have access to Qualtrics. How does that work? Is it a few-month free trial or that kind of thing? No, so if you're using this book to teach your course and you don't have access to Qualtrics throughout your university, just get in touch with me or someone else at CloudResearch. You can contact our support email, and we will basically set up a meeting and have a conversation with you, give you and your students access. As I mentioned, each of the Qualtrics survey files that you can create, if you're familiar with that from Qualtrics, they're all compatible with Engage, so they can all be uploaded. A lot of times what we do is give people kind of a short demo of how to use Engage. It has all these extra features that are really draw on AI. It's a much more powerful survey platform, but we'd be happy to give you a short kind of meeting to run through it and then give you and your students access to it during the semester. Any other questions that I can answer for people?
Hi, this is Sarah Beth. I'll just jump in with a follow-up question.
Sounds great.
Following up on my earlier question, and as I just recently used the Connect platform, but I'm assuming that using the Engage platform would not be free for those outside academia. I seem to remember that it came with a cost like all the others did. And so I just wanted to double check that use of the actual platform would not be free, but use of the textbook is for outside
so
academia.
great question. We haven't had, the book is primarily aimed at research methods courses, which are commonly taught within academia. We make Engage available for free for these student projects, especially at schools where people don't have access to Qualtrics. Using Engage generally for research, it is, as you correctly assumed, a paid product. So we have a whole team that kind of oversees and develops Engage. I've been kind of one step away from that and working on this book. And we make it available for all these kinds of student projects, the kinds of things that are within the book, but using it for general purpose research or other kinds of projects, there is a charge associated with that. And we have a team that'd be happy to talk about pricing or to walk through kind of the different use cases.
Okay, great. Yes, this is what I thought.
Okay.
So yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, but for a lot of these student projects like that we go through in the book, we're allowing people who are teaching with this book to use it with their students, especially in cases where their university or college may not have access to Qualtrics.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
So I see another question here. It says, it looks like the textbook is online only. I was able to download the course materials, but is the textbook available as a PDF? I can send you a full kind of preview PDF once it comes out from Cambridge. My understanding is people will be able to download a PDF from there as well. But right now, the version that we're able to make available on our site is a kind of just a web page. But I can send you PDF chapters. It's just not the full typeset, pretty version that comes out after the production process with Cambridge. So I see another question here from Jason asking about how does the book teach the use of AI in research in terms of data security, academic integrity, transparency, a number of other kind of issues there. So the book, especially in the first part where we're introducing this kind of mixed methods way of collecting data, it doesn't focus too much on all of these different issues in part because this technology has moved pretty quickly, even since the time that we wrote the book. And we're focusing more on like the application and having students understand how to use this technology. We have lots of other things, supplementary things that we'd be happy to share, where as researchers are adopting this technology, we talk about security, integrity, protecting participants' data. We have all these things kind of worked out for using Engage. They're just not things that we thought students, in an introductory course needed to know, or to add into the book. But what we often try to do in introducing AI in the book is show students a particular way to use it and how to use it successfully. So there's in chapter 4, we talk about measurement and creating different instruments to measure psychological concepts. And there's actually an activity where we show students how to use AI in a way that can be helpful for scale development. This is just demonstration purposes, but we actually have them develop their own scale. And we give them different prompts where, after creating an initial set of items, they can then use AI to refine those items, to remove double-barreled questions, or to remove questions that have too much overlap. And so there are different demonstrations like that where we try to show them some positive and good ways of using AI throughout different types of research activities. But this might also be a good place to mention, we're in the middle of writing a series of blogs that kind of amplify or introduce some of this content in all kinds of different, I think, just engaging and exciting ways. And that might be a great place for us to talk about all these different things to be aware of when you're using AI in research. But a lot of these things, I think, even professionals are still kind of figuring out and sorting through, best practices and things that people are comfortable with. And so we just didn't include that in the chapter about using AI to like interview participants.
Hey, this is Sarah Beth jumping in again. Did you say
Okay.
that, did you mention that this book is going to be updated over time as new developments come out in research? And is this a living document online, or is it static?
Yeah, great question. So especially with artificial intelligence, things are just moving so fast that our plan is to update the book. How that aligns with the production process and everything that happens in the world of publishing, I'm not exactly sure, but just since the time that we handed in the page proofs, basically over a year ago, or coming up on a year, AI has moved so much in that time, and there's so many more things to talk about in terms of data quality and how to use it. And so we have plans internally to add kind of like some supplemental chapters or other things on our webpage that just stay ahead of the curve and introduce these things to students as technology continues to advance. Again, what that means in terms of like the official version from Cambridge or other versions down the road, I don't think we have answers to all those questions yet, but we have plans to kind of continuously introduce things and teach students how to use these tools as they develop.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, students, other people, I should say, researchers.
I think this will
And
have wider interest, even
yeah, I was
outside.
gonna. I appreciate your questions and kind of just even positioning of having folks outside of academia here. It's a great chance to also mention. So we've written this content and we have this book, but obviously reading an entire book is a big time commitment for people. And so we also have a series of workshops where we're teaching this content, and those are free. People can sign up for those. Share it as widely as you want. If there's other folks in your organization who would benefit from a guide or teaching this sort of stuff, we have 2 planned here in the next month. One is a guide to getting started with online research. We cover different platforms, some things to be aware of in terms of data quality. And then next month, we have a new one that we're offering, a data quality masterclass, going over problems with data quality, how to measure it, different things like that. So we have a number of sort of workshops where we're teaching this content, and those are free to join as well. Yeah, someone asked if I can share a link. Let me grab that real quick. On the CloudResearch webpage, we have an events calendar and I'll share that in the chat now. Down below the calendar, I think there are sign-up options. So I'm going to put that into the chat now. A link to the CloudResearch events calendar. Oh, so looks like someone else maybe got, Teresa beat me to it. So right now we have 2 on the calendar, but we have a number of different classes that we're planning and that we're going to offer. And so checking that or adding yourself to our email list is a great way to stay up to date with these. We record them, so they'll be available on our YouTube channel, but attending allows you to benefit from question and answer and kind of the live presentation. So I'd highly recommend those. So a good question from Adam asks, does part 1 of the book spend time explaining things like type 1 and type 2 errors, external and internal validity? So we get into a number of different issues, but I could imagine there are some topics that just through conversations have come up with people that we don't get into. And so in order to make this course very active and engaging for students, there are some things that you imagine we'd have to decide to drop or to cover in less detail. So we certainly get into all kinds of questions about external and internal validity when we talk about experiments. We don't spend a ton of time, or I don't know if we have a lot of coverage of type 1 and type 2 error. We have an abbreviated coverage of things like sample size, but our thinking was that we really wanted to, again, prioritize active learning and having students do these sorts of things. And because the text is open access, a lot of people are already working from some other book or some other source, and you can always supplement the content with information that you like to teach about some of these topics. Or what we've often found is there's certain ideas that we don't elaborate on a lot in the text, but they actually come up naturally as you're teaching. And so a good example of that is, I mentioned earlier, there's a assignment or an activity that asks students to sign up as participants on Connect and participate in 2 or 3 studies just to get a sense of the wide variety of studies being conducted online and to see what it's like to be a participant before they start collecting data. Someone who was teaching with this book had students go through this process. They're answering all these demographic questions as they're becoming participants. And one of the questions was about household income or about personal income. And the students said, do I fill this out for my own personal income, or do I put like my parents' income, right? That's a common thing when they fill out financial aid forms for FAFSA and stuff. And it led to this whole conversation about measurement error and how different people might assume different things about the question, how researchers asking that question, like us at CloudResearch and putting that question up, I don't think ever considered that there might be students answering this question and unsure about what income to answer. So there's a lot of things just by the doing that allow you to talk about that concept, I think, in a way that is much more tangible for students than just reading about it in the book. And so I think, you might find some topics that we don't cover that you would ideally like to be in there, and you can supplement it with other stuff, or you could, maybe it'll come up like naturally as you're doing some of these different activities.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But, we're also very interested in feedback as people are using this. As I said, a lot of people have already taught with it. And so because, we have plans for future versions, if we find there's something that a lot of people are asking for that's really important, that's missing, we're happy to consider that sort of feedback. And so as you're using it or looking it over, if there are things that you think are important that are left out, we'd love to hear about that. Just scanning over the chat and the question and answer to make sure I'm not missing anything. I'll also mention if folks are teaching, we also have this fund on our website called the Spark Fund, where people teaching with this book can apply for a small amount of money to help fund some data collection with students in the classroom. So what we've done in the past is that an instructor teaching with this book can apply for like $400 to use on CloudResearch Connect, and it helps collect some data for some of these different projects. So as we go through projects in the book, we tell students that you can send one of these links to friends and family. You can collect data through Sona if that's something your school or university has set up, Or, right, the fastest and easiest way is to collect the data online. And so there's a Spark Fund, I just mentioned, or sorry, I saw someone with, said they're excited to explore this for the fall. So that Spark Fund is available. You can find it on our website, and you can submit an application to receive several $100s to help support some class collection. All right, I don't think I'm seeing any questions. If I'm missing something, please feel free to post it again or unmute yourself. I'm happy to hang around here for the next several minutes if anyone has other questions they'd like to discuss. But if not, thank you everyone for being here today. And you can feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions about the book or about using it. Be happy to meet and chat about it more. But thank you very much for your time and joining us today.